Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week's Rseat is one that we haven't had in a long time, but I wouldn't exactly call it rare. We used to get it all the time in GT Sport. However, this time, there are multiple strategies that seem to work for the race, so let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is at long last, the Beetle. The Lambo appears to be the meta, but the Ferrari, RCZ, and Porsche are all just about as quick. I wanted to choose something that wasn't any of those that could still compete as long as you drove it right. The Beetle was the answer. I managed to get a 132.2, putting me in 51st place overall, but a 31 is definitely possible. As you can see, there's already one that's almost in the 31s, and I'm in second place with a 32.2. It seems like there's a lot of variety, but really it's just about 4 or 5 other cars that are taking up the vast majority of the spots. The first few corners are the toughest in my opinion. What we're going to do is look for the 50-meter board, and right before that, you're going to hit the brakes. Brake heavily and start to turn in at the beginning of the grass there on the right. You want to be in second gear as you approach the first apex. As you hit the apex, shift up to third gear, trying not to take too much curb, and aim for this black tire mark here in the center of the track. Squeeze in full throttle before you then change directions, and after you change directions, then you lift the throttle. Still maintaining about half throttle, shift up to fourth gear and gently squeeze on it after you come off the curb, aiming to get your entire car on this curb right here. If you hit this left curb weird, it's going to make you oversteer, but if you hit it really solidly and ride on it for just a second before then turning off and tracking out, you should be good without any oversteer. Now's a good time to take note that you should be shifting at about 90 to 95% of the digital tack. As you start to approach the number boards, you're actually going to look after the 100-meter board for this little access road right here, and right as you hit it, you're going to hit the brakes. Stay fully braking in a straight line until after the 50-meter board, and when you're completely past it, you're going to turn in, dip down to second for just a brief moment, hit the apex, then back up to third, and you want to get fully on the throttle without catching any oversteer like I did there. Any oversteer before the curb will translate to more, so you want to make sure you get grip exiting there. As we approach the 50-meter board, you're going to brake about 2 car lengths before it with the goal of turning in right at the 50-meter board. Trail braking in fourth gear, I want you to turn in and make sure you're on the brakes until you hit this first apex. After that, you're going to gently add steering and hold the angle until the car bleeds off enough speed that you can get on the throttle and hit this second apex. It's going to take some practice to know when you can hit the throttle like that. Be brave, keep full throttle, and about a car length before this curvy black tire mark, you're going to hit the brakes. Getting down to second gear and then immediately to first gear as soon as you start trail braking in. I like to actually miss this curb to make sure that I can get grip without sliding, and you should be in second gear when you do add throttle. Once the entirety of your car is aimed to the right of this curb here on the left, you're going to add full throttle in a straight line. Right before you get to the inside curb, you're going to then turn in, and after you turn in, you're going to come off the throttle, add a little bit of brakes, downshift to first gear up on the curb, then back up to second gear before you get on the throttle. Third gear also works here, but it can be really easy to accidentally slide too much if you're in third gear and full throttle, so I like to use second gear for just a second and then shift up to third. As you set up for the next corner, I don't want you to try to align yourself in the left and then brake in a straight line. Instead, you're going to draw a really wide arc that then tightens up as you approach the apex. So you're going to be continuing to steer to the right as you approach it, and then add just enough brake that you don't lock up the tires, and then continue trail braking in all the way to the apex. As you can see, I don't go more than about 80% brake as I turn in, and I get all the way down to first gear before I even approach the apex. Once I'm close, I'm fully off the brakes, and then as soon as I hit it, I'm back in second gear, making sure I feather the throttle so I don't get any understeer until I've got grip, and then I shift back up to third gear. You only need to go about to the middle of the track, and you can stay full throttle before then turning in and then lifting as you then shift up to fourth gear to make sure that you can get all the way to the apex and then stay full throttle until the next braking zone. If you do have to lift here, it's not the end of the world because you are getting really close to the next braking zone and you won't lose that much time. So this is going to seem pretty vague, but it's actually pretty easy to spot even when you're going full speed. As you can see, a little bit of the pavement here on the right is peeking out between the dirt and the grass, and right at the end of the gray part of the pavement here on the grassy portion is when you're going to hit the brakes. Turn in right at the 50-meter board, get down to first gear to get it to rotate, and then pop it all the way back up to third gear as you go over the apex on that throttle, and be very gentle. If you're sliding at all, by the time you hit the curb, it's going to turn your car all the way around. From here, if you're just trying to hit a quali lap, then you should just stay as tight to the left as you possibly can. Don't make the mistake of going all the way over right about here at the pit line, because if you do cross the pit entry and cross that white line, it will invalidate your lap. But at the end, just hug this left wall and you should have a really nice lap. As I mentioned before, the very first few corners are definitely the most difficult for me, and I think for a lot of different people. You've got to sacrifice this first corner just to set up for the next two. As you go over that curb, you want to then get on the throttle and stay on the throttle, which can be really tricky because both of those curbs can cause the car to slide, and if you slide out at all, it's going to cost you a lot of time and momentum. This next corner is pretty tricky, and I'm realizing that pretty much every corner is pretty tricky. You got to brake really late into here, turn in really late, and make sure as soon as you go over the curb, you get on that throttle as hard as you can, which can cause it to slide out because you do go downhill just a little bit. And if you touch the curb at all while you're sliding, then it's going to make you slide a lot more. So maintaining grip on your exits is really huge. This double right-hander, it's really important to maintain a lot of momentum because it is uphill. So try not to slow down too much, and you do have to trust the tires are going to work. Like with any S's, in between them, you just want to be in the middle of the track. You're not really going to sacrifice one over the other. You just want to essentially sacrifice both of them at the same amount. This, not penultimate corner, but that really tight hairpin, most people brake way too heavily and way too late. You never need to go full brake in that because you're always turning for just a little bit. This final corner can also be really tricky. I guess they're all just really tricky, but you got to make sure you're maintaining a lot of momentum and getting on that throttle really early. So you kind of want to decelerate to the lowest speed that you're going before the apex and get on that throttle as you go over the apex, or even before if you can. Sacrifice the entry to get a good exit because it's uphill. You've got to have a lot of momentum going up there all the way to the finish line. A lot of the time when we get a race like this where there's one required pit stop and it's just the hard tires, it's usually the kind of thing where you can pit at the very beginning and then you can just avoid traffic and run your race to the very end like that. But they've made it just enough when it comes to the multipliers that pitting in the middle of the race and taking tires is just about as fast as it is pitting whenever you can avoid traffic and not taking tires. If you are unable to save your tires, if you do need to take tires, then you've got to pit somewhere towards the middle. Anywhere between, I'd say, maybe laps 6 and 9. I think most people are doing laps 7 or 8. But if you do not want to take tires, if you're confident in your tire saving ability, that really opens up the options that you've got. If you start from the back, you can just pit at the very first lap or at the end of the very first lap and just avoid the traffic. And if you start at the front, you can do the opposite. You can just run away and then pit at the penultimate lap and just do whatever you can to avoid having to race anyone whatsoever. The downfall is if someone was able to pit in the middle and take tires and they didn't have to deal with a lot of traffic, then they're most likely going to be just as fast as you and you're going to be at a disadvantage because they're going to have much fresher tires. If you find yourself in the middle of the race and you're stuck behind a group of people that you absolutely know you can go faster than, then you could choose to pit in the middle and also not take tires. And it could give you better track position, but then of course you have to worry about them potentially beating you because of their much healthier tires. At the beginning of this race, I thought that guy was blocking me deliberately, but he immediately pulled over, so I guess no harm, no foul. I think he probably just didn't know I was there. Anyways, I had a really good race earlier on when I was streaming where I hit immediately, didn't take tires, and just ran my race almost completely by myself to try to pass as much of the traffic as I could, and you're going to see that it worked pretty well, but you're also going to see exactly why it wasn't the perfect strategy for that moment. I guess starting from the back and then finishing where I did was pretty good. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get to it. For this race, I wanted to make sure that I chose the strategy where I'm going to pit somewhere towards the middle and try to keep my tires fresh at the end of the race so I can try to make moves the entirety of the race. As I touched upon a little bit, you're at the mercy of the pace of all the other drivers around you when you choose this strategy. Now, if you're qualifying, then chances are you're going to be put with people who are of similar pace to you, so you probably won't run into too much unless you find people who don't have quite as good race pace as they do time trialing pace. You may have experienced this before. You may be the type of person who time trials well but doesn't race very well, or vice versa. I know a lot of people who don't set really good times time trialing, but when they actually go to the race, they are much faster than the people who set similar qualifying times. Real quick, I thought that he was going to completely miss his braking because there was a little bit of lag that made it look like he was going faster than he was, and I ended up running directly into him as he parked it on the apex. I definitely felt bad about that, but since I didn't actually gain a position and I lost a position, I just decided to keep going. I figured if I tried to apologize to him, I would pause the game and then the auto drive might actually run into the next guy, and it actually seemed like he benefited from it. So, sorry if you're watching Ricket VG. I apologize for running into you, but I do think it actually helped you. But I digress. The reason I'm talking about qualifying versus time trialing pace is because it doesn't always give an accurate representation of what you're going to necessarily do when it comes to the race, because I generally do race against people who are a little bit slower, at least towards the back, and then I get closer to the people who are of a similar pace to me by the time I get to the front of the pack. And so one of the reasons I do that is just to show how good the anti-meta car can be. And you've probably seen me in races where I've done a really not competitive anti-meta car, and you can see people who I would usually beat really, really easily. Not trying to be a cocky jerk right now, but there are lots of people who I could beat very easily in a similar machine, but when it comes to the anti-meta car, you can see that I struggle a lot, and that really I just try to illustrate what the anti-meta car can do against some of the more powerful meta cars. Anyways, I digress again. As you can see, we had a good race. We gave each other space. We're still battling it out here. And then I was finally able to solidify this. And so if you look at my times on the right, we hit a 135.9. This car is capable of doing 132s the entirety of the race. And so this really shows exactly how damaging it is to the end of the race to have to battle with traffic. Now, that is offset by the fact that you will have better tires at the end and you will be able to maintain a much better pace. But if I were to pit at the very beginning, by the end of the race, if I don't take tires, I'll still be in like the low to mid 33s. So there are definitely reasons to do either strategy. And so you've really got to decide what is best for you based on your ability to save tires and your opponents that you find in the race. You can make the decision as you enter the race. You don't have to decide before you do it. You could decide even on the third lap that you want to not take tires. It's really going to be up to who you're racing and their race pace compared to yours. With this many cars viable in this race, you're going to find that each of these cars definitely have different characteristics. So for the Lamborghini, I know that this thing is very agile and it's going to be able to maintain a lot of momentum up this corner or up this hill around this corner, and it should be able to rotate really quickly, and he should be able to get on the throttle really easily. However, it looked like he made a little bit of a mistake, and the Lambo does not have a ton of power. So since I was able to get a better exit and I had his slipstream just briefly, it was pretty easy to get all the way in front. Now, you should still definitely defend as soon as you get in front of people, and I didn't realize he was going to continue squeezing me, so as I went to take the normal line, he was still squeezing me, which of course is well within the rules. It's just not exactly sportsmanlike. So I decided I was just going to do whatever I could, get my elbows out, and just take my line. And luckily, he didn't try to stay side by side as I took the second corner, and I was able to get all the way in front of him. I was just going to move on, but actually I want to talk about that. It's 100% legal to squeeze someone after they defend and stay really close on the inside, but you've got to understand that they're most likely going to try to take a better line as they go into the brakes, and it's also just kind of not nice. A lot of people, actually the vast majority of people I race with, even people who would squeeze me in that situation, would then give me more space as they try to take more space, because usually if you try to take such a different line than you're used to, especially side by side with someone else you're forcing to take a different line, chances are things are going to go awry, and things could have been much, much worse than they were with that guy. And so I think we both really lucked out. Me especially, because I was the one that had something to lose. He was going to lose that position no matter what. I was trying to take that position. He almost pushed me entirely off the track because he decided to race me like that. The very first time I've ever raced him. On top of that, if you go and watch when I did pass him up the hill, he squeezed me all the way almost to the wall, making me put my left tires up on this curb, as you can see, almost in the grass, which could have also been disastrous. So he just wasn't being very respectful, and I wasn't about to give him any more respect than I thought he deserved. Since I had to battle so much, the next person after those guys that I passed was 3.5 seconds ahead, so I was able to get all the way to the end of my 7th lap and then go in the pits, which was pretty much exactly what I meant to do at the very beginning. I just lucked out that I was going to the pits completely by myself and didn't have to worry about anyone else behind me or in front of me as I came out. You can also see on the right that I hit a 32.8, and that was completely without slip, and my without slip pace here is a 32.6. The really good cars, the Lamborghinis, the Ferraris, the RCZs, and probably the GTR and 4C can all hit 32. I had an optimal of a 32.3 in the RCZ, and I hear that Nicholas, young Nicholas, in the Lambo actually hit a 31.9 in the race without slip, which is insane. Since I was lucky enough to pass so many of the people on track and not have to worry about anything when it came to the pit stop, I was able to take my tires and just set my own pace. And as you can see, if you look at the right, I was mostly in the low 33s and the high 32s. If I was focusing a bit more and it wasn't 3:30 in the morning, I probably would have been able to stay in the 32s very easily. The one person that I did manage to catch was our handsome friend, Hogston, and I knew, because I was watching his stream, that he did not take tires, which meant that his tires were 13 laps old, and mine were, what, just about 5 laps? Most cars are going to struggle pretty bad when it comes to being on lap 13 without changing the tires. But our boy Hogston is very good at saving his tires, and the McLaren is also very good, so it was a match made in heaven, and it actually made it pretty difficult for me to catch him. I also used the wrong gear going up this hill. I was watching him and he thought that I was toying with him. I was actually doing everything I could. I just made a little bit of a mistake there. And instead of diving on my friend, I decided I was just going to stay behind and we could just kind of work together for a moment, not try to battle too much, and potentially we'd be able to catch any of the guys ahead. In this situation, even if we had exactly the same pace, he was going to have to slow down, or he was going to be slowing down just at least a little bit, because the reality of having 13-lap-old tires is they just simply can't do the same thing that 4-lap-old tires could. So as soon as we hit this corner and it looked like he was going to go off just a little bit and had to slow down just a little bit too much, I took my opportunity to try to get next to him. As any respecting race car driver would do, he decided to continue battling with me, and I think that's the best thing he could have possibly done. He is always such a clean racer. I mentioned this, I think, just in the, was it 2 weeks ago? Was it last week maybe? I've had many, many great battles with him, and this ended up being just like it. He gave me space, I gave him space. There was just pretty much zero contact here, and we were both maintaining a really good speed. And at the end of it right here, he actually completely had my number. I tried to brake a little bit late, and that ended up screwing me up because I locked up my tires. And despite that, he still gave me space, even though I wasn't even next to him, because he is just a true gentleman and I love him. And you all should be following him on YouTube, maybe even real life. I think I actually made that joke the last time I shouted him out. I didn't think that I said don't follow him in real life, but now I'm going to take it a step further. I want you to follow him on YouTube, and I want you to follow him in real life. That is a joke. Maybe. Now, despite the fact that his tires are absolutely ancient, he still got a really good exit, better than I did, and it was all I could do to just stick in his slipstream. I realized right here that I wasn't going to be able to make any kind of clean move, so I just went to the normal line. He went to the inside, and I think just because of our battle and whatever was going on, he ended up braking just a little bit late. That happens to all of us. Hogston, don't feel bad about that. I've done that exact same thing in pretty much the exact same situation, and I've done it many times on stream. Please give Hogston a follow, and like I said, follow him in real life. It'd be really funny. I can't stop myself from making that joke. Please don't follow him in real life. Definitely subscribe to him on YouTube. I'm going to try to remember to put a link. I mentioned earlier, I'm just jumping all over the place. I mentioned earlier that if you go on that outside curb, it's going to make you slide, and I don't think that Bombardier meant to push me all the way to the edge. I think he actually gave me just enough space, but I wasn't quite in the right position, ended up sliding just a little bit, and I wasn't able to take that position, so Bombardier was able to stay all the way in front of me. I could be a little bit disingenuous and say that he's definitely in one of the meta cars, and that gives him an advantage, but even if he did have an advantage there, he was driving better than I was at the point where I tried to pass him. The way that he put his car right there in the center, hugged the apex, and got a really good exit was also just great racecraft. He might have made a mistake right before that, but he's doing all the right things. Meta car or not, good car or not, he very much earned the position here that he's keeping, and I made too many mistakes to try to take it. So at the end right here, he made that one final mistake, and I was able to get a pretty good exit, but as you can see, it just wasn't going to be enough. I had slipstream all the way up the hill. I tried to pull over, tried to pull right in front of him, and it just didn't work. So shout out to Bombardier for a fantastic defense on the last lap. Shout out to Hogston for going side by side with me for like 70 billion corners in a row. And yeah, that is how you do it if you want to actually take tires. I'm going to jump real quick to the other race I did earlier where I did not take tires. In this race from earlier today, our friend Damien Canadian, also known as Damien Chafe, went in after the very first lap, and I was actually going to do a different strategy, but then when I saw my friend KP with someone I didn't know, even though I was in 5th place at the end of the second lap, I decided to go in the pits and just not take tires and see if I could do a massive undercut on the entirety of the field. I was hoping that I could actually win this race, or at least get second to Damien, and I just wanted to see what we could do with this alternate strat. So this wasn't the very best way to do it, since I went in not at the very beginning and did lose some time battling people all throughout the first and the second lap, but it was just good enough. And so coming out of the pits, you can see I just fell down to 12th, and it looks like Damien is going to be right in front of me as I come out of the pits. As you can see at the end of that outlap, our friend Red also followed Damien, and unfortunately Damien got a penalty. So as we were both passing Damien, I thought this was going to be a fun opportunity to either work with Red or try to battle him right here. And as soon as I pulled onto the normal line, Red lifted. Red, you are a beautiful man. You do not have to give me a position, but chances are he was just realizing that I was going to be able to go pretty fast, and he probably didn't want to mess with that and probably just wanted to follow along. Either way, it's all good. Red, I adore you. You're wonderful. And because of that, I had completely clean air, which is exactly what I wanted from this strategy. By the time we got to lap 6, Damien was all over my tail, and he went for a move. Now, rather than just letting him go, I decided to drive like normal and let him take the pass. In reality, I probably just should have let him pass because he was going to anyways. Damien is one of the world's best at Gran Turismo, and I should have just let him go. But sometimes I do want to race Damien, despite the fact that I know I'm going to lose. So after that, I decided maybe I could try to do something. The very smart move to do would be just to let him go as soon as he tries to go, because like I said, and as you probably know, Damien is just one of the very best at Gran Turismo, and I don't know if I've ever beaten him on pace. So if I want to just have a really good race, which is entirely the point of this pit strategy, I should have just let him go and then bump drafted him every opportunity I got so that we both benefit from his pace, essentially. And then hopefully by the end of the pit cycle, we'll be ahead of the vast majority of people. With that said, sometimes the intrusive thoughts win. And if I ever get even a little bit of a better exit or just enough momentum coming out of the corner that I can get next to him, sometimes I just take it. Now, like I said, this absolutely is not the best idea because Damien is straight up faster than me. It doesn't matter what he's driving, Damien is faster than me. So instead of bump drafting him, I half-assedly defended. I don't even know why, and then realized mid-defense that there's just nothing I can do. I braked and tried to stay in front of him. I was never going to. I just let him go at this point, and now we can work together. Or, you know, more than likely, Damien's just going to drive away from me. Just like I thought, at the end of lap 9, Damien has just completely run away from me, and unfortunately, he now has to try to pass Quick Finisher. If you've ever watched any of my streams, you probably know how I feel about this guy. Quick Finisher likes to drive people really, really dirty, and then tries to wait until they try to get some kind of revenge on him, and as soon as they do, he posts up compilations of people quote-unquote driving him dirty. I think he just knows that people aren't willing to put the same effort and energy into trying to slander other people, but this is exactly the kind of stuff he does. He defended hard, and as soon as Damien tried to go on the outside for a pass, he pushed Damien all the way off. He pushed Damien so hard that he slipped on the curb, almost sending himself off. And I think he did it because he knew Damien was on old tires, and he knew that Damien would get a penalty right there. Damien also doesn't like to get revenge on people for the most part, so I think that he just knew that he could safely get away with it. Fast forward 3 laps, and my tires are absolutely bleeding. I'm only able to do 33.3, 33.1. I had a 32.9 just a few laps ago, but that was probably going to be the last time I even came close to touching 32, and I am still pretty much closer to him than I was before. That meant that I was actually going faster than Mr. Quick Finisher. In the car he's driving, when I did the same strategy that he was, I was hitting 32.4. He's doing 33s. There's absolutely no benefit to this except to show that Quick Finisher is just kind of a crappy guy. I just do not like this guy. I try not to bring this kind of stuff into my videos, and I've had a few people talk about how completely different my videos are. They say that I sound professional and nerdy in my videos, and that's pretty accurate. And then I'm pretty unhinged in my streams, and I'm usually unhinged because I have to race people like Quick Finisher. The entire purpose of this cut was to make Quick Finisher look bad. In reality, I don't have to make him look bad, he just does it for himself. Anyways, we're gonna jump to the end of the race. Jumping to the very final lap, Damien has once again caught up to me, and our friend Outlaw had gone into the pits. I hadn't even realized that he had not gone into the pits yet. Damien is going for a move here, and since nothing really matters and neither of us can catch either of the two guys at the front, I decided to just defend with everything I could, and to my surprise, I was able to actually stay right next to our friend Damien right here. Another funny thing that happens if you haven't actually watched any of my streams is for no reason I can't stop running into Damien. I don't really get into accidents very often. I especially don't run into people who I consider my friends, but for whatever reason, I've run into Damien completely unforced probably like 20 times in the past year. I have no clue why it's always him, but it's always him. And Damien, I appreciate you for still being my friend. After holding my own for just a few corners, Damien was able to get all the way in front of me, which is exactly what I expected, and that's pretty much how the end of the race goes. But if you're paying attention to the actual race and not me just slandering this Quick Finisher guy, Damien and I actually started in 13th and 14th position, which means that we both actually got 10 positions by doing the no tire strategy. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be leaving you with a look at my current members. I love every one of you. Thank you.